Is this podcast episode title like totally a loaded question? Absolutely. Let's dive into it. Welcome to the Intuitive Eating Mama podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer D'Amato. I am an intuitive eating counselor and I'm also a mom to 4. This podcast is not just for mamas, it's for all women who are ready to ditch diets, ditch the scale and food guilt forever, and instead invite peace with food, increase their body trust, and confidence in all of her choices. I believe this show is going to shed some light on sneaky ways diet culture has infiltrated your thoughts, your family, and your well-being. No matter the episode, I want you to walk away feeling informed, inspired, and encouraged. So whether you're taking a walk, washing the dishes, or carting kids around, let's dive into the latest episode on the Intuitive Eating Mama podcast. All right, for this episode, I'm doing something I've literally never done before. I'm standing. So a while back, I said to my husband, I really want to get a standing desk. And he's like, hey, that's a really big commitment. I mean, changing all the furniture over in the office. And what he didn't know is I was just going to change his desk that he uses in here. But anyway, he made some good points. Like, what if you don't like it? I mean, it's an investment. And then you're like, ugh, I really wish I didn't do that. And I was like, all right, valid. I like to jump, which is why it's great I married somebody who likes to process. So I waited for a while and I was talking with someone and she's like, oh, I got this riser, that goes on top of my desk. Didn't have to invest in a standing desk. And I was like, please send me the link. Here I am on Amazon, literally in cart, purchase 3 days later. Yes, it did take 3 days to get here, but that's fine. It matches, it's white, it's pretty. My husband set it up and I'm kind of in love. Now, I don't know if I'll record all my podcast standing, but I do find myself getting really frustrated sitting for hours and hours and hours and hours. And I get up and I go move around and I, walk from one end of the house to the other. I check in with my homeschooled kids and I'm just like, I do better when I can stand up. But that's hard to do when you have to bend over to, type things or, write things down, whatever. So I decided this is going to be my trial to see if I enjoy standing. I, so far, am loving how much more productive I feel. Just my brain works better when I'm standing. Also, my back hurts less, my shoulders, all of the things. So I haven't decided if I want to do the treadmill. I know some people love their walking treadmills. I don't know if I'm going to go that far. We'll see. Right now, I'm just happy to have some flexibility instead of sitting all day long because it was driving me absolutely bonkers by the end of the day. I actually felt more tired sitting. So here I am, standing, recording this episode. I'm hoping audio is still as good as I think it's going to be and that I'm not knocking into things because my microphone is so great and picks up everything. But I put a loaded question as our podcast title. What does the scale mean to you? Now, you probably read that the way I intended, right? The scale that your body would stand on, whether at home, in the doctor's office, I don't know, where else would you be on a scale? I'm not really sure. Those are the two main places. What does it mean to you? And it really isn't the scale itself, is it? It's what the scale represents. It's what the scale means. It's what the number on that scale makes you feel about yourself. So when I thought about the scale and what it could mean punishment. For me, for a really, really long time, it was a way to punish myself. See, you overate. You ate too much. Now, you can't eat today. You need to wait. So I would punish myself based on the results of the scale. The scale said a number I thought was unworthy of existence. I mean, at that point, it was really toxic. So I would punish myself. I would beat myself up. Maybe the scale means correction. It's not full-blown punishment, but the scale for you means, oh, I need to fix things. I need to correct myself. I need to do better tomorrow. I've shared on this podcast many times about orthorexia and my personal struggles with the obsession. Well, the scale, I was just as obsessed. I was weighing myself a minimum of twice a day and using it a lot for punishment and a lot for correction. You can do better. You should do better. See, tighten it up, tighten it up. And when things were hitting my breaking point and I was really trying to tighten it up. I mean, I'm air quoting that, but like I couldn't sustain it anymore. I was literally fighting my body every single day, trying to use a scale to correct myself. See, the scale's going up. You've got to fix things. You've got to fix things. You need to do better. The scale could also mean guilt. Like you go on it and just feel guilt. Like it literally represents like guilt in solid form. It has never been anything but a guilt-producing tool. I feel guilty for what I ate. I feel guilty for my size. I feel guilty for that number. I feel guilty that number doesn't change in the right direction. I just feel guilt upon guilt using that scale. Now, another thing that I've kind of talked about within the context of what the scale could mean and what it did mean for me, and I've talked about this idea of negative motivation and how we think it's going to work. We think if I motivate myself, but in a negative way, right? That punishment, that guilt, that correction, all of these, I can use this for negative motivation, that it's going to actually be my motivator. It's going to be the thing that works. And the thing about negative motivation, which I have shared before, is it might work for a little while, but it will wreak havoc on how you feel about yourself. It will crush your self-esteem. It will ultimately land you in a very negative place. I mean, literally, you're focused on the negative, leading you into negativity. Negative motivation never works. And if it does, we kind of maybe relate it to, okay, I did really bad on that exam. I'm going back to that, like how school has unfortunately shifted our perception of the real world. It doesn't work the same. Okay, I did really poorly on this assignment, so that's going to motivate me to study harder for the next test, right? Can you relate to that? I'm in school, like I got a C on this one, I got a D on this one, whatever, and I just know now, like I better get my crap together, study more, give more time to this, like a negative motivation, right? Because I did poorly, I want to do better. We adopt that mentality and try to use negative motivation with our health, and it backfires. There's a lot from like that educational model that we try to apply in the real world, which just doesn't work. I mean, even just thinking about that, like we grade ourselves, we rate ourselves. There's so many consequences, we give to ourselves for in the context of our health because we've taken these ideas of how life has always been for us and we go into adulthood and it's just not working because it doesn't work. So what does the scale mean to you? I have a lot of clients now, the scale like means nothing. They don't go on it. They don't care what it says. They're like, good for you. It's just non-existent. That's where it is for me now. I don't put any stock or value in the scale. I don't have one and don't get on one. I don't go on one at the doctor's office. It's been a long journey getting there. But the last time I was on a scale, I didn't look at the number. I told them, please don't tell me. I don't want to know anything about it. I was going into surgery and it was required. And I was not going to fight that. I was going under anesthesia back at the end of 2020, like, please know the right amounts. Like, I want this to be successful, but I don't need to know anything about what's on that scale. I had another scale in my life. I've talked about orthorexia. I've talked about, what led to that was macro counting, which, I know people like to say, oh, it's a lifestyle. No, it's a freaking diet. And I can tell you it's a diet because there's restriction, because there are rules, because there are limitations, there are shoulds and shouldn'ts, and there's earning and burning all involved with macro counting. So don't let anyone ever tell you it's not a diet. Lies. The other scale, and of course what comes to mind for me, and maybe those of you who have used a scale when it comes to food, you might have thought of that scale. I do think we often think, scale for our body, but if you have tracked, weighed, measured your food, whether that's points, macros, calories, I don't know, using containers, just for portioning. That could mean also punishment, correction, guilt, negative motivation, right? There could be a lot packed into that. I've had clients where they've tracked for so long, the fear becomes I'm never going to be able to not track. I'm never going to be able to let go of the numbers, the values, the points, all of that. And it does feel that way at first. And I can tell you, I was just having this like aha moment literally in the last couple of weeks going, I can't remember now the grams and calories for a chicken breast. I had that sucker memorized for years. I could spout that off to anyone and everyone, and probably did because, well, that's what happens when you think you're, holier than thou and righteous in your eating, is you tell everybody about it. I can't tell you about those grams, about those calories. I mean, I can tell you, I can still see like what I was tracking, but I can't see the numbers, like everything's blurred out. I was on a very specific meal plan. Oh my gosh, it was so boring and bland and beige and green. That's the only colors that ever existed. I counted almonds, 5 almonds. I don't even really like almonds. So the scale for you, when we talk about the scale, you might initially go right to body weight and how you feel about that scale and what it has done to you over the years. How it is a liar. I mean, if you think about some of these scales out there that are telling you all sorts of data based on you standing on it, oh my gosh, there's some great videos out there of people taking scales and moving them all around their house and how the numbers literally change depending on where it is put down. That should tell you something. Anyway, but you might have also thought of scales like weighing your food, measuring your food, tracking your food. I do think they land in the same place. I do think anytime we are measuring, tracking, whether it's our weight, whether it's the weight of our food, the size, the amounts, there's going to be consequence to that. It really does negate the whole person. It really does negate what your body needs and wants. It really does negate the intuitiveness that your body was born with. Think about that. If you go on the scale and then it is punishment, it is correction, guilt, all of these things combined, what does that do to your eating that day? What changes do you make? And then on top of it, what does it do to the negative self-talk? Those thoughts that swirl around in your head. How do you feel about yourself? There are times and places for a scale. Now, if someone is recovering from an eating disorder, a diagnosed eating disorder, and they're in the refeeding phase, they're probably doing some tracking because they haven't been eating nearly enough, and they're doing it under the care of a doctor. Or in a situation like I was, where I was going under anesthesia and they use the weight to determine the amount that you're given. Like, I want that. I don't need to know the amount, as far as my weight, but I need them to know what to utilize. But using the scale, using your body weight to determine health, to decide on how you're going to eat, if you're going to allow yourself to eat, these are not things that are actually moving you into a healthy place. If we think about our health only in terms of weight, we've even limited 98% of our health. One of the things I work with my clients through a process of defining health for themselves. It is amazing what they come up with. Like, absolutely beautiful how they start defining health. Does it include nutrition? Heck yeah. Does it include moving their body in some way? Yes. Does it include rest? Yes. Variety, balance in their, dietary needs each day? Yes. Does it include how they talk about themselves, feel about themselves, clothes they put on? Yes. It is absolutely amazing what happens when the scale is not part of that definition anymore, that your weight is not the focus. And when you can finally see that your health is not determined by this one area. I don't know if you needed to hear that part today, or maybe you needed to take a new look at the scale, how you've been measuring and even tracking your own health, how you look at yourself after you've gone on the scale. It's not required when you work with me that, you throw away your scale. And I've seen some amazing practitioners who, work with clients and they take hammers to it, in a bag outside. And I bet that feels so good and so powerful. I have had clients though, they're like, Jen, guess what I did today? They threw it away. They're like, it felt like the most amazing, powerful thing I've ever done is throwing that scale away. Some of them are like, yeah, I just put it away because, maybe their spouse used it and they didn't want them to get rid of it. They're like, it's hidden somewhere. I don't even know where it is in my house anymore. It's not required. But what happens when you start to let go of that being the way you measure your health and well-being, you literally open up the door to insert, what do you want to look at, utilize to measure your health and well-being outside of weight? So take some time today, tomorrow, whenever you have it, and maybe just kind of think about what the scale has meant to you. What has changed? Is it still the same? Are you still struggling in that space? And if you are, what support do you need? What would help you move to where you want to be more? Do you need someone to work with you through that process? Do you just need to go throw the dang scale out? What is it you need most? And it's not something ever to be ashamed of, to say, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to let go of it yet. I'm still kind of in that contemplation and stuck place where I'm just like, I can't. There's nothing wrong with you being in that place. Something people hear from me all the time is, you have body autonomy. You have that choice, that right to say, no, I'm just going to stick right here, right now. But to even acknowledge it, take an assessment. Take an assessment of how it has been affecting you. Is it still? What do you need most right now when it comes to the scale? All right, I hope this was helpful. It was definitely an interesting one for me standing here. I'm very animated when I talk, so I'm not sure this is going to be repeated all the time. Thanks for listening today. If you have time, would you rate and review this podcast if you're listening on Apple? And then even if you're listening somewhere else, would you take a screenshot, share it on Instagram, and you can tag me. It's at Jennifer_Intuitive Eating Life. I would love to give you a shout out and thank you personally for listening. All right, until next week.